Hello, everyone. This is another series of talk time, and we're talking about addictions today and the addiction mindset and how hypnotherapists work with that. We've got Teresa Saunders that is talking with me on this topic. She's my fellow hypnotherapist, and I'm Meredith McCarthy. So hopefully some of the information that we talk about in these series is helping people who might be interested in a career in clinical hypnotherapy, or perhaps just wanting to use hypnotherapy as a tool for their own growth. So when we're kind of looking at addictions and addiction mindset, what's the first thing that pops into your mind, Teresa?
Years ago, if you'd asked me that same question, I would have said alcohol or gambling. Nowadays, I would probably say social media and addiction to phones.
Mm.
Yes.
We've got some really good things actually happening where they're taking the cell phones out of schools so they can't use it during school hours, which I think is amazing.
Definitely, because they are a disruption, because they just think that they hear that ding or that sound or even the vibration of the phone, and it's like, oh gosh, I've got to respond now. It's
Mm,
like an instant world nowadays.
mm. I I can see it changing the way that kids are learning social interaction, and this very quick switch on and off, like I'll block him or I'll block her. And then the next minute they're talking to them again. But it's almost like, well, stuff you. I really don't want to have you in my airspace right now. I'm going to block you. And that's the easiest way. But people can feel really dejected, that there's a lot of emotional harm that happens when you feel rejection or completely like you don't have a valid voice to speak back. So the etiquette of things, like once upon a time, if you're on a phone, I guess you would hang up and not answer them again if it started calling. But we have this social media feeds, and we've got people who are interacting on different platforms, and it is incredible how confusing it can be, I think, about your value, your self-worth. But it's equally addictive because you get rewarded when people validate you.
Yeah, I mean, I think like when we talk about addiction, we often forget that other side as well of rejection. And if people don't get as many likes or shares for their posts and that can have a massive impact on the way people feel and
Mm.
their emotions.
Equally, people have taken their own life because of the trolls and terrible comments that people have made, and they don't know how to handle it. And they're very alone and isolated, and they're hearing all these horrible things, and potentially none of them are true, because people that, get a little bit cocky, because, it's easy to attack someone in that way. But when we're looking at the old, I guess, devices and the addiction to that, I remember a little while ago, I literally forgot my phone. I went home, and it wasn't until I was home, I was like, oh, I left my phone in the office. That was interesting. And it was a particularly stressful time. And obviously, my brain just needed silence. It didn't need to listen to music or do anything. I just needed to be. Um, and what surprised me is how many times I would go to pick up and check my message and realize, oh, I can't until tomorrow. And it was quite a weird feeling to notice how often I would do that.
It's sort of just became, I think, like a phone now is sort of like you could like it to your handbag or to your wallet. You expect it to be with you wherever you're going. It's not far away. Yes.
So we can look at that as being really beneficial, that we have these technology opportunities to connect wherever we are, but also equally we need to have the art of nothing in particular. We, as human beings, our brain needs a break, and addiction cycles again can really interfere with our ability to have a positive break. So even if we think about cigarettes or vaping, a lot of people go and have a break, but many people who are vaping actually vape inside because no one notices. It's amazing.
Mm.
And we've got a decline in cigarette rates in New Zealand, but an increase in vaping rates, and especially the youth, because of the flavours and things of cigarettes, or I should say the vaping. It's kind of like candy to the brain.
Yes. And that's the thing, isn't it, with addictions, it gives that flow of dopamine, that hit of dopamine with your addiction, and then that you just need more and more of that hit.
Yes.
So we get into that cycle.
Yeah. I'll explain a little bit about nicotine and dopamine, actually. They're very similar in structure. So inside our brain, we have receptor sites. And when we have an influx of nicotine into our brain, when someone smokes or vapes, it docks onto the dopamine receptor sites that the brain produces, thinking it's dopamine, but it's not, it's nicotine. But it makes you feel good. So that's why there's a physical addiction that's set up, because the nicotine levels then start to drop away, and the brain learns, hey, if I have another hit of nicotine in 7 seconds, I'm going to feel normal again. Yeah.
Mm.
So it's quite interesting how that nicotine setup works. There are three parts to an addiction: the physical, the emotional, and the habit. So the reward center is definitely a big part that plays in the addiction cycle, right? And then because of the need to top up that feel good feeling, we produce habits, and the habits are connected to emotion. So uh, very quickly, our human brain gets into a cycle of habit that feels more normal to do it than not do it. So many times people, when they're even thinking about giving up drinking or smoking or vaping, or maybe the social media, it can feel really hard, and it can feel really awkward to think of even life beyond doing that. So as a hypnotherapist, I guess what we do with people is get them to go through a little bit of the pros and cons of change, right? So what's in it for them if they were to change? And that power of a question, like we've talked about curiosity in the other session. When we're thinking about the idea of being curious, why is someone going towards that addiction? Why are they drinking too much? Why are they smoking too much? Why are they on the social media too much? What's that? What are they trying to fill?
Well, it's not always, because everybody is different, but a lot of time there's a gap, there's a hole in your life that you're wanting to fill it with something that feels good. And like
Mm,
we've just spoken about, if we take some sort of drug or do an action that feels good, you get that release of dopamine, which gives that good feeling to you, that feel good emotion. So then you pick up the habit of continuing to do that, and it becomes more and more for your behavior. So often it's because there is a hole, a gap, you're trying to avoid something or fill it with something that's better. Yeah.
mm. So this is where the hypnotic mind can come into its own, where we can imagine success. We can imagine, what would it be like if a month from now you'd been free of that addiction? What would that look like, sound like, feel like? And we start to get the client to imagine as if they're there now. That this is a big part of what hypnotherapists do. It's not always that method, but that's one that I personally use a lot, is getting a person to future pace, is what we call it, to imagine a positive outcome. Equally, though, when we're looking at addiction, we might want to invite the client to look at what would happen if we didn't change. And so we might push out the timeline a little. We might go, okay, I want you to imagine 5 years from now, if nothing changed today, what would that look like? In 5 years from now, if you were to be successful with this change, what would that look like? So that can be quite interesting about the cumulative effect of staying addicted to something versus the relief or the freedom that you might experience by letting it go.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on that, Teresa?
Yeah, I do like that, of like looking at what would your life would be like if nothing was to change. And equally, I like the way that if you then say, well, now imagine if you were no longer doing that, how would your life be?
Mm.
Imagine what would change as well. So then you've got the two different sides of the story, and hopefully the positive side, the changing and letting go of that addictive habit, has that stronger emotion. You can feel that with that stronger emotion. Often as well is one of the things is like using, I suppose, the strong sense of aversion to a habit. If you know, when they pick up a cigarette and they inhale it, getting that negative real, have you used that where you've done it, where you build that negative, real negative strong impact and emotions and feelings when they draw on that to use?
No, I don't use aversion as part of my process. Um, I I guess I focus more on the freedom and the doing script. What are you going to do, and how's that going to feel when you do that new thing?
Mm.
So that's probably where I spend most of my time building with my client. But absolutely, using aversion therapy and making it gross every time someone inhales, certainly that is something that hypnotherapy can exaggerate or make it very strong. So there is this natural repulsion.
Yeah, I don't particularly like using that one, but I do think there's a certain um type of client or person or nature that actually works strong for. Just, again, like we say, we tailor them for every client,
Mm.
our session to every individual client. And I do think that works well for certain personalities. Yes.
So what springs to mind when we're talking about aversion is actually the liked dislike NLP technique, which is helping a person to change the way they experience a certain type of food, for example. So if they've got a sugar addiction, or they don't want to eat bread anymore or something like that, they can play with what we call the submodalities. We've talked about that in another talk time edition, but it's really talking about how that person has experienced that sensation. So what does it look like, sound like, feel like, and to reverse it. So simply put, this is how it rolls. You've got a food that you really like, and you want to give it up because it's not good for you. And you get the client to think about a food that they really dislike, like something that would make them feel sick to even look at or smell or taste. It might make them feel gross. And you get them to describe what that's like. But first of all, you start with, what's it like to eat the food that you know is not good for you? So you're getting the person to unpack all of that experience. When you smell it, how does it make you feel? When you bite into it, what happens to your mouth? What are the sensations you're feeling, and so on. So you go through and you get them to describe to a very, very deep level of what that experience is like. And then you equally go through the food that they dislike in great detail. And at the end, you get them to close their eyes and imagine that the food that they like is going to become the food that they don't like. So you're shifting over the descriptions that they've used for the food that they don't like to imagine that happening when they take that bite of chocolate, or when they have that piece of bread, or whatever that is. And at the end, you test it. So you say, okay, if I had some chocolate now, how do you feel as you think about having that chocolate? And usually they have quite a strong negative reaction. So it can be quite interesting. It's called like to dislike, and that is an NLP tool, which can be quite useful. And hypnotherapy utilizes a lot of that kind of understanding, where we can change the way someone emotionally feels towards something, which is important actually when we're thinking about building confidence that they can give up something and have a better life because of it. We need to build emotion. Emotion is a key part of this experience. Yeah. What do
Mm.
you think of that, like to dislike? Because I know that you've had training on that.
I've had training on that, and yes, and I will say that it can be very strong emotions and feelings. Perhaps maybe put in that you won't actually vomit in it if somebody's having a really strong, and see you laughing there, but someone's having a really strong emotion, because I have seen people heave and gone for the bucket in that case. So
Mhm.
I do like to sort of reinforce it that it's going to be that strong, but no matter what, you're not actually going to to vomit. The feeling will be there, but you will not. Yep. Just because you don't really want that happening in your therapy room.
No,
You want that strong association, but yeah, you don't want the aftermath, the cleaning up.
absolutely.
It's amazing how strong the mind can be.
Totally, totally. I wanted to talk a little bit about, I guess, people out there and their journey of change. It takes a lot of courage for a client to pick up the phone or send an email or a text to you for help.
Mhm.
And that may have been quite a number of months or years build up to that moment where they've finally decided, yes, I'm going to step up and make it a big change in my life. And they are really, really scared. They're also ready, but they're equally scared. And I think as a practitioner, it's our duty to reassure that life's just going to get better and better from here as they make those positive changes. Um, it's really amazing when you're working with someone who's had an addiction for as long as their adult life is, and they suddenly get the courage to turn up and be real about it, you know? And I think to hold space and really celebrate that choice is a big part of what we do as therapists, to acknowledge, the process that got them to sit in front of you today. This is really important that they are seen and celebrated, and that external validation is actually quite powerful for that person in that moment. And having an external witness to celebrate their success, because they might have been secretly doing these addictive behaviours, and so potentially they might not have anyone external other than you celebrating that success with them.
Definitely, and the fact that, that, like you say, it's a big step that they've done, ringing you, turning up at your room. Um, it could be really embarrassing for them, the addiction that they've actually got, because it might not be openly seen, but they're wanting to deal with that and to acknowledge that, and just remember, as we are as therapists, not to be judgmental in that situation, and to embrace them for their positive change. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. So when we're looking at the idea of, taking action, it takes a bit of courage, yes. And people might want to quit right then and there. Let's say it's drinking, or smoking, but a lot of times they're not ready to quit the first session either. So you need to tune in and just check what their intention was for the day, because they may in their mind need a week or two to warm up to the idea. And so we're doing pre-work with them potentially. So you've got to go at the client's pace. If they're not fully ready on that day, you may be setting them up for a bit of failure. So you've got to listen to your client's readiness and preparation. There might be some complications still going on at home that might cause them to need to delay their start date. So listen to that, is it appropriate for them to start? The other thing too is alcohol. If you've got someone who's not gone a day without alcohol and they suddenly quit, it can actually be very, very dangerous. So teaming up with their GP, making sure they've got the right understanding of noticing warning signs if they are in danger of sort of having a negative effect of not having alcohol in their system for the first time in forever. These are things to be aware of in a therapeutic setting. It's great that they've come in, but is it needing to be managed in a broader sense for safety?
And do they have a support person, whether there's somebody that's physically there or a phone number that they can contact
Mm,
to support them through that journey? I mean, some people's change might be quite rapid, but like we're saying, everybody's unique, their journey is different.
mm,
And to be mindful that that could be the case, and to ensure that they do have supports around them to help them with this change.
mm. The other one is normalizing relapse. So when we're looking at the addiction, there's a lot of people who fail a number of times before they get it right. And they may have had a number of times where they've attempted, and it's kind of whittled away their confidence potentially, but their eagerness to give it another go is awesome. So you can look at that client's journey and ask them, so what would you do differently now, knowing what you know, having relapsed before, what might you do differently? These are really useful questions, and it helps the client prepare for those particular parts. And that's when, in that hypnotic journey, you can really reinforce that wisdom, that plan of action in whatever way that is. So this is just something to consider. Um, what are your thoughts on that, Teresa, in the way of journeying someone through relapse prevention or relapse awareness?
Again, it is a step that happens more often than not, and normalizing it. I really like the fact that you've said like normalizing it, because people come in and just say, I want to beat this, I want to change, I want to stop smoking or alcohol, drugs, etc. And not everybody can do that immediately, and it's not always going to be 100% straight away. Don't beat yourself up about it. Acknowledge and praise yourself. Sort of say, how good am I? I only had, I don't know, 2 cigarettes today. I would have had 10 or 15. Look to find something that you can change into a positive thing from that relapse. There will be something. Might be something small, but acknowledge it and give thanks for that. Be grateful that you managed to do that. And tomorrow, then you might be able to do a little bit more. Or it could be the next hour, you could do a little bit more, depending on what it is that you're trying to change. Yeah, I think
Definitely.
sometimes small steps, breaking it down to small steps can be good.
I think, again, being client-centered and really keep your curiosity on, and you're going to then hit the target better. You're going to help that client uncover what they need for them. Also, that strong network of support outside of the session can be really essential for many of your clients. So getting them to think about that, is your home alcohol free? Or, what does your fridge look like currently when you open it up? Now, some may say, hey, hypnotherapy, you hypnotize them, so even if they see the alcohol in the fridge, it doesn't belong to them. It's like, yeah, nah, that's nothing. It's kind of like that idea of going to the supermarket where there's alcohol for sale. It's like walking past it and not even noticing it's there, or having a big smile on your face knowing you don't need that anymore. So it's really important that we do set that client up for success in whatever environment they might find themselves in, because sometimes it's not about getting rid of all the alcohol, because you might have your friends and family who are still okay to drink. So what do you want to do? Because you can't just take alcohol away from the world. It's going to be there, kind of like sugar too. It's what do you want to feel as you see that object? This is important to get right, I think, when it comes to addiction. So when someone lights up or someone vapes, how do you want to feel every time you see someone do that, rather than the feeling that they've missed out on something, or that wanting for it? So it's important to address those things with the client and ask them, how do you want to feel when you walk around and you see alcohol, or how do you want to feel when you see someone vaping? So go back to the client, find out what their idea is, and reinforce that with them.
Mm. And it's the same sort of thing with social media and with, younger people, or even older people with social media. Until we actually start to withdraw ourselves from some of that use, we don't actually realize what we've missed out on our lives and what we haven't seen going on around in our own little, in our own little environment.
Yeah. And it could be, hey, let's think of a gardening project that I'm getting myself out and about rather than being stuck on my phone sitting on a couch. Or it could be doing some painting or doing up the house in some way. So you've got a little project that you can focus your mind on and get a natural feeling of accomplishment from it. Playtime is really important for humans, no matter how old or young they are. We need to have this playtime, and often the gadgets have taken over that playtime space.
Joining a club, going to yoga, or children playing netball or some sort of sport instead of being on their phone connecting with their friends, because that connection, although it's still important having the connection via social media, it is different than meeting somebody one-on-one, face-to-face.
Mm. So let's say I have a 13-year-old that's been brought in, and their parents are describing their addiction, their unhealthy addiction to their gadgets. Now, this is not necessarily the 13-year-old's want to change. So when we're dealing with something like that, it's really important to tune in and go, how do you feel about your use of gadgets? And talk to them about their perspective, because of course the adults in this space are going to have a different perspective from the child in this space. So it's important as a therapy session to really tune in and go, okay, what's the reality check on this child? How do they see it? What do we want to support them with? Because just because they've been forced in doesn't mean that change is going to happen, but it might do. But it's looking at how might we get this young person to see where their parents are coming from. So, what is that about? Now, many times the parent might actually come in to the session, especially when they're 13. So it's quite common for their mother or father or someone to come in and sit with them during the session. And obviously they're going to be a bit guarded potentially, because the ramifications of saying something and what might happen after the session is a little bit risky. So children will often maybe hide a little bit of what's really going on. Now, if you get a sense of that, there is often an opportunity to talk to the parent outside of the session and just say, hey, do you think after so-and-so is getting more comfortable with me, that perhaps I could have a chat with them by themselves? Now, I say this not for every child, but sometimes it is important to kind of go, what's really going on here? Because there might be a hidden world going on for that 13-year-old child that the parents actually aren't aware of. And they're not going to tell their parents about it, but they may tell you about it. And that's where we can address those things in a more relaxed way, without the parent being there, without the fear of the ramifications of that. Because, this is where there are predators out there, and they're meeting lots of people that may not actually be another 13-year-old girl, that might be a 45-year-old man or something like that, who's grooming them. So there are lots of stuff like that is happening. It's horrible to think, but this is the world that these children are currently being exposed to. There's a lot of things that aren't being checked about the usage. So if you are a parent out there, there are certain apps that you can get that can kind of oversee what your children are up to. So you can kind of check in and just make sure that their online activity is kosher. However, saying that, children are clever. They know how to switch on and off stuff, probably quicker than you can. So they can work their way around it. They get to a certain age where they're quite, their friends will tell them, hey, if you do this and go on private mode and this, that, and the other, you never do know. So the other thing is too, they can always get an old gadget from an old friend as well. So you never know what they're using, especially if they're quite addicted to it. And you as a parent go, no, you're not allowed to. Well, I don't know if that's going to stop them, especially if there's an addiction going on. People get rather slippery at that point. What do you think, Teresa?
Definitely, and sometimes when you're told no, it encourages people to do more of what you shouldn't be doing, especially if it's a parent that's telling you you shouldn't be doing. Maybe it's better to sort of try and educate sometimes a little bit, and see and sort of lead them somewhere if they, if you feel that is that much of an addiction and
Mm,
they need help to change, then go and see some professional that can perhaps assist them to move forwards.
yeah.
Um, yeah, because children can dig their heels in quite deeply when they want to.
They can, they can. So hopefully this is kind of I got you guys thinking out there a little bit about the addiction mindset and the layered parts to it and how many topics it might actually cover. It's quite a big scope of what we work with when we're thinking about what an addiction is. So, if you're interested in training to become a hypnotherapist, please check out the NZACH site. We have links to the website, but we are a school that is there to help you to learn really effective hypnotic techniques and tools that can support people to overcome addictions. And this is amazing work, it changes people's lives for all the good reasons. Um, and I'm so passionate about helping people understand the nature of a mindset and how quickly that mindset can be upgraded, changed, shifted to their advantage. Hmm.
Mm.
So look, if you would like to subscribe to our podcast, it would be lovely to have you on board. Every week we're going to be talking about different topics. If you've got any questions you'd like to ask us, please pop it in the comments and we'd love to talk on those topics. Yeah, so look, check out the website, the NZACH website. It is there to help people learn the craft of clinical hypnotherapy. So anything that you'd like to say to finish up here, Teresa?
I just think if you do know somebody or yourself has an addiction and you are feeling that it is overtaking your life, and that please do seek help. There are plenty of different helplines, support groups out there, not just hypnotherapists. We can help you move forwards if you want to change your mindset. But if you do need that support, please do go and get help.
Yeah, communities are essential for success. So don't isolate yourself if you are that person. Put your feelers out there and yeah, get the help that you feel is important for you. So thank you for tuning in today. Like and subscribe, and we'll be back in another week. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.